How's it going, everyone? Where do I start? In another video, I had a couple of different ideas in my head that I wanted to cover, and actually one particular subject that I wanted to talk about here, and then I came out and I started thinking about raising kids, and how, kids are demanding, and when they make demands of you, you can't just tell them to fuck off. Well, you can, but if you're a good parent, you won't. And I gotta say that it's the most difficult job by far, because when you're working for yourself, I should say when you're working for someone else or doing, like a 9-to-5 job, it seems like harder work, and you wish you might be home with the kids more often, but then you actually do it. And if you're a stay-at-home parent alone with the kids, you have a lot of time to think in between screaming and yelling, but generally it's pretty chaotic, which I guess kind of leads into, I don't know, hey bird, I don't know what I wanted to talk about, which was, our addictions, or I shouldn't say our, because that brings you into my addictions, so I'll say my addictions. Fortunately, this is not one of them. Of all the addictions I've had in my life, alcohol is not one of them. I drink, I don't know, maybe every couple months, have a couple beers. Lately I've been having a cider each day in the evening, and I don't know, it's a great tool, but it got me thinking about drugs and substances and consumption patterns, because I've always been the kind of person who consumes a light amount of something. Like, for example, when I smoke, I don't smoke a whole joint when I smoke weed, I just take a couple tokes. And I don't drink a six-pack when I drink beer, I just have one or two. And I'm that way with about everything I take, for the most part, unless I'm trying to go through some wild psychedelic experience, But I've always wondered what it is about people that creates an addictive personality. I was doing some research about depression today, and they've found that, while obviously influences from the environment play a role, as well as brain chemistry, bacteria, body chemistry, all these different things. But there's also a genetic predisposition. There's a particular gene or section of a gene, and they have short and long versions. If you're born with short versions, you're more likely to be depressed, and if you're born with long versions, you're less likely. And that's and the thing is, with depression and anxiety and addiction are very closely tied together. Often people are seeking to fulfill that need, or rather that depression, to ease the pain by using drugs. But then there are people who don't have any internal pain, or at least not that they know of, people who use them for what it appears to be other reasons. So we have those who abuse heavily, and then those who are what you not call a recreational user, but a functional user, such as the functional alcoholic, stoner / heroin addict, cocaine user, you name it. Whereas some of these are lesser or more dangerous, obviously. And as I was watching a Simpsons episode the other day, Lisa Simpson showed a chart. This was about a 15-year-old episode, and she said, "Look, you see, as happiness goes up, or I should say, as intelligence goes up, happiness goes down." It was an episode where Homer became really intelligent, and it got me thinking. I wonder if that's true. So I got in and I did a little bit of research, started looking into it, found out that in fact it actually is the opposite. That the more intelligence you have, the more happier you are overall. But this is of course still speculation. There's a few studies that show this. But what it does show is that people who are less intelligent tend to have more mood swings and are less stable with their emotional state. And I found that kind of interesting. They're more likely to lash out, they're more likely to be belligerent and hateful. And I think most people that anybody who knows, somebody who's really belligerent and violent, they could be a super intelligent person, or they could be a very dumb person. It really doesn't matter. There's no facts I'm trying to throw at you as far as who's what. The one point I'm trying to get across is that people who are intelligent are more likely to consume drugs. And they found in a study that a very high percentage of people who are considered intelligent or have higher IQs or are artists consume more drugs. Now, I've been a cannabis smoker for 25 years, and I've smoked it regularly. I had to quit for 2 years one time, and I felt fine without it. But the minute I could smoke again, I did. And I've asked myself, what is it? Well, as it turns out, from what I've read, because I've always been interested in addictions and behaviors, because I believe this tells us a lot about ourselves and why we make a decision where we're following our intuition where we shouldn't be, for example. You know, I've always said, follow your intuition, and I kind of have to backtrack and say on certain mathematical concepts and equations, never follow your instinct on a math equation or, you know, a problem like that, solving. We have to think these things through because our primal mind is designed to pull out the first thing that seems to fit or work. And so it's working with being compatible with your mind and allowing it to think for you when you know it'll work and not when you don't. Such as the reaction you might take in an accident before you get in an accident you might be more likely to use that intuition than one problem solving. So anyway, back to the addictions. People who have addictions, or that consume substances, often who are intelligent do it for what they call novelty-seeking behavior. And it's because of various reasons, but mostly because certain things in life can become more exciting if you, say, climb to the top of a mountain and smoke a bowl, or have a beer with your dinner, or smoke a cigarette. And cigarettes are a very basic novelty that many people are addicted to. Hence vaping. I mean, that's why I started vaping. Some people would say, well, you know, why don't you quit smoking totally, you know, I mean, why vape? And I say, because I like the addiction. I like what it brings me. I don't like the fact that I shouldn't say I like the addiction, but rather I know that it's a compulsion, and I know that I have that within myself. It's something that I've always had, and I'd rather pick up a vape pen than, you know, a cigarette. So, in a way, a person could use that as a justification. Say, oh, I'm smart, I use drugs. Or a person could say, oh, I'm dumb, I use drugs. It doesn't really matter. People use for their various reasons, but it's not just drugs that I'm talking about here. We're talking about novelty-seeking behavior. This can be skydiving, jogging, rock climbing, even people who go shoplifting just for the joy of it, you know, for the rush. People who are out after that adrenaline rush. You got the epinephrine, norepinephrine, your serotonin, your dopamine, and all these different compounds that are working together. And they're so misunderstood. I mean, there was a time when they believed depression was caused by a lack of serotonin. The only reason they believed that is because when people were supplemented their serotonin levels, they seemed to ease the depression symptoms. But depression itself is not a lack of serotonin or dopamine, it's a combination of elements. And I bring depression back in because depression and anxiety and life, these are things that we all have. And we're told to face life on life's terms. In other words, to not be addicted, to not do drugs, not consume substances. But so when we do, we're often told, hey, you know, maybe you're just weak-willed, you need to be stronger. And then, but I see the people who are completely, you know, who have cleaned themselves up, clean and sober, totally happy. Many of them are happy. Many of them are still dwelling on the past and what they had, as if they've lost a loved one, you know. I say just, you know, embrace what you do have as a compulsion and just learn to control it as best you can. Because when I talk about intelligent people, I'm not talking about academics, of course. I'm talking about not just the people that are really smart about basic, like, things in the world, but artists, musicians, you know, painters, people who draw, work with clay, all different types of things. Anybody who gets in and creates things is intelligent, because intelligence is expressed through creativity, because there's no other outlet for people who otherwise they don't know how to express themselves. You know, some people just cannot hold a conversation, but they could tell you everything they want to say in a song, others in a painting. And I'm a little bit of all different arts, so I mean, I'm not really into one particular thing heavily, but that also correlates to my behavior in daily life, like with my career or anything else. I'm always jumping from thing to thing. Whereas there are some people who have one career and they're happy with it, and they have one art and they're happy with it. So just remembering that we're all a little bit different, and we all have different needs and interests. We should try not to dismiss each other merely because we consume substances, because there are deep-seated reasons why. it may be easier for one person and not another to quit. Of course, only us as individuals can look at our own hearts and minds and see if it's something that we could gain from to, say, quit a substance such as vaping, or whether you drink or smoke cannabis or whatever it may be. There have been times when I've wrestled in the past with my cannabis usage, saying, hey, would I be better off if I didn't smoke? And some people will say, well, cannabis makes people lazy. I don't disagree with that at all. In fact, when I smoke cannabis, I find myself becoming instantly just like, not always. Sometimes I'll smoke a bowl and I'll want to go out and do something, but if I smoke too much, I know that I'll cause myself to feel burn out. So that's why I like to only take a little bit. And everything does have its dosage. People who take kratom know that a small dose of kratom will give you energy. A larger dose will make you feel a little bit stony and sedated. And most strains will do this, even the green strains, whereas even the red strains do the same thing. But they do have certain properties that are more prominent. Dosage dependent. Cannabis is the same way. Extend this to everything we do in life, all the foods that we eat. You eat just the right amount of food and you're happy, you can go about your day. You eat too much and you're tired after your lunch, So my point here is that it's not about what you consume or which substances you consume or how many. It's about how well you control what you do consume and whether your dosage is proper. A person could be doing 5-10 different drugs and be otherwise totally healthy and have no adverse effects from it, whereas another person could do just one drug and they could destroy their life because of the amount they do and not being able to control themselves. So if you're a person who is what you might call an addict, whether it be tobacco, marijuana, otherwise, if it's not affecting your life negatively, and it's not changing your perception, it's not changing your ability to hold a conversation. In other words, if you tend to slur your speech and become drunk too often, then maybe you're taking too much. And if you smoke so much weed that you just pass out constantly, then you're probably smoking too much. But only you as an individual are going to know this. My only point here is to maybe put out the word for people who aren't addicts themselves or don't consume substances, to realize that this comes from a deeper seated need for novelty from the people who otherwise can't find it. And when a person says seek life on life's terms, or they look down on someone because they have to consume a substance, just realize that it's not because they're missing out or they don't understand how awesome life is sober. Like the AA will say, live life on life's terms. Well, life's terms include a lot of different substances, so we consume them. That's what they're here for, right? No, of course, that's not a justification. Only, like I say, only we as individuals know in our hearts whether we're doing too much or not enough. So try not to let somebody else influence what you think you're doing with your life. If you want to have a beer every day after work, do it. If you want to smoke cannabis, do it. Don't let what the law says or what your family says or anybody says affect your choices unless they can show that they're being harmed by your usage or other people around you have to, deal with you. And then it becomes a problem. So there's no shame in a little bit of novelty in this crazy world. Everything's medicinal.